I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in. Here they go again, tempo mode, dropping the throw. Once it out, again, goes to the left. It's intercepted at the 35. Outside the numbers to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 25, to the 20, to the 15-10. Mike Edwards, touchdown Tampa Bay. That's the dagger, my friend.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast, live on YouTube today. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. Joining us today, very good friend of the show. We've been talking to this guy forever, and thank God he has not become too big time for us to talk to us. We just watched him on NFL Network the other morning. It was pretty damn cool. But Trevor Sikkema back on the podcast once again. Boys, how are we doing?
Doing well, and happy to have Trevor on. We were talking before the show. I was going to mention it on the show. It has been 11 months, almost to the day, since we last had Trevor on the show. It was right before the Rams-Bucs playoff game. The date of that was January 19th. So it is almost 11 months, over 11 months, almost a year since we've had him on the pod. It's kind of hard to believe, but happy to have it back on.
Good to know I'm still the jinx. I do a Bucs podcast and then they lose in the playoff to the Rams. I don't even live in Tampa anymore, and I'm still having to be the jinx. No, it's awesome to be with you guys. Never too big time, no doubt about that. I was asking you guys in the pre-show, how long you been doing this podcast? Because when Evan asked me to come on, I was just like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I haven't been on there, I feel like, in a while. And I remember back my first year with Pewter Report back in 2017. You guys asked me to come on your podcast, and so I knew it was that long, but like, congrats to you guys. I don't know if you're around a milestone or anywhere close to a milestone, but like doing a Bucs podcast for this long, man, still being in the game. Y'all are awesome. Salute to you guys. Appreciate you having me on the show, but it's awesome that you guys are obviously still doing this and doing it great.
It really means a ton to hear that, man. We put a lot of passion into this project, obviously, and some seasons have been more fun to cover than some others. We're grateful we got to see a Super Bowl victory, but we are here today to talk about the 2022 season and beyond. So for anyone who has been living under a rock, it is safe to say that while the 2022 season is not over by any means, the Buccaneers still first place in the NFC South, still just as much a chance as any other division leader to have a playoff spot right now. But with that being said, it's been a disappointing year. With Tom Brady obviously coming back out of retirement and deciding that yet again this roster is good enough to go on a Super Bowl run. Bruce Arians retires a couple of weeks following that news, and we are left with Todd Bowles and company. A lot of people thought this transition would be smoother than it has been, but here we are. The Bucs are sitting with a 6-8 record. Thank God, first place in the NFC South. But Trevor, let me ask you this. Were people wrong for their expectations to be as high as they were coming into the season? Because me and Evan picked them to win 11 and 12 games respectively this year. And I mean, even predictions like that with hindsight now being 2020 just seems so far out of reach.
I mean, look, 11 wins certainly should not have been out of the question for this team. Shoot, even with the injuries that this team has sustained, thinking that they could have won 10, 11 games was well within their reach. I mean, they obviously still have 3 games remaining. They've got 6 wins so far on the season. And just think about how poor some of the showings have been for this team. You even change 2 of those results around. All of a sudden, they've got 8 wins, you get 3 games left. Okay, probably win 2 down the stretch. Boom, there's double digits. So to think that it was far-fetched or an oversight or anything like that to predict them winning 10 or 11 games, I mean, I definitely disagree with that. Now, if you were picking this team to be like the number 1 seed in the NFC, okay, there were reasons to think that they were going to take a step back from that. You looked at the other schedules around the NFC. You knew that they were going to be easier, even if you didn't think Philly was going to have 1 win at this point. You knew that they were going to have a lot, given the easy schedule that they've had so far. So I guess my answer to that question is no. I mean, I don't really think that it was unrealistic to think that they would have won that many games. It just feels like everything has gone wrong. Like you look at the coaching change. All right, Bruce Arians steps aside. Todd Bowles takes over. Okay, everything else is the same. In fact, Arians is still on the staff. It's just he's not wearing the head coach headset. So how much of a step back could we have really thought that was going to make? And obviously it's clearly something that has really affected this team in a negative way, but there was no way to tell that. Then you go throughout the season, you look at some of the injuries, right? Tristan Wirfs has missed time. Obviously missing Ryan Jensen throughout the whole year has been really hurting them. Julio Jones missing all the time that he has missed has really hurt this team. Chris Godwin not exactly being Chris Godwin of old, still getting back after that major injury. And then, of course, Shaq Barrett going down as well. And Shaq was really the only guy who was productive for them off the edge. So at that point, you list things off and you go pass catchers, defensive trenches, offensive trenches. Nothing's really working out so well. It looks like Leonard Fournette's taking a massive step back. They don't have that go-to guy in the passing game. And I'm just kind of waterfalling here to say everything that could have gone wrong for the Buccaneers has gone wrong outside of like Tom Brady getting hurt or something like that. It just feels like all of this stuff has come to a head and they can't figure it out one way or another. When one thing dips on this team, when it comes to really good teams, other areas of the game or other areas of the roster are able to pick it up. That has almost never happened at any point this season. They have never been able to pick up the deficiencies that they've had, whether it be injuries or bad play calling or deficiencies on either side of the ball, whatever it was. And it's just, they're not a good team right now. They have good players. The Buccaneers have good players on the roster. That's why you hear on NFL Network and ESPN all season long, oh, are they going to figure it out? Are they going to get into swing of things? The thing is that they've got good players. They're just not a good team. This is just not a good football team right now. They have not been able to pick each other up throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think what you just said was magnified last Sunday because you saw what they could be. In the first half, you saw exactly what they could be and what they were for 2020 and 2021. I mean, that's largely what they looked like. The first half of the Cincinnati game really reminded me of the first half of the Buffalo game last year, which, of course, Buffalo, made it interesting, but the Bucs were able to win in overtime. And then the second half showed you what they actually are right now. And I think that, like you said, when one thing goes wrong, it's just, and we talked about this on the game, the review show, when one thing goes wrong, it just seems to crumble down. And that wasn't an issue in 2020 or 2021. When one thing would go wrong, somebody was able to pick it up, and they haven't been able to do that consistently, whether it be the lack of talent. They're not as talented, right? I don't think they're as talented, especially, the interior of the offensive line, not as talented. Donovan Smith has taken a big step back over the previous 2 seasons. Tom Brady has not played his best football. So they're not as talented, but on paper, I mean, you're still looking at, and just like you said, that's why the topic isn't, oh, this season's over. It's, will they turn it around? Because everybody knows that, just like you said, they have good players. It's not like these players are bad. It's just right now they just can't overcome the bad things that happen during games.
Well, I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to ask you about this coaching staff in particular. While we talk about where the Bucs are right now, we can talk a ton about the talent on this team, the quarterback, and we'll talk about that shortly as well. But what do you make of this coaching staff? We posed the question to Sean King earlier this year. Is it unfair for people to pile on to Todd Bowles the way that they have? Because, again, everybody expected this transition to be smoother, but given he is still a first-year head coach, not his first tenure in the NFL, but you know what I'm saying, first year as a head coach of this Bucs roster, is it unfair to really harp on him for a bad year like this when the expectation was, oh, he cannot fail given the roster? But I mean, clearly he kind of has, even though they still have first place in the division.
Yeah, and that's such a complicated question, right? Because head coach, a lot like quarterback, often gets too much praise when things are going well and too much blame when things aren't. And, I know that Todd Bowles is one of the most respected minds in the NFL when it comes to a defensive perspective. I mean, he is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Being a head coach is a different animal, though. Being a head coach is like being a CEO. It's less about having your hand on one side of the ball or the other, although some head coaches do, and some head coaches do it very well. But there's just so much managerial parts and like these almost like leadership parts of being a head coach as opposed to just like being a really good coordinator. And I'm not saying that Todd Bowles isn't a good leader, but there's no doubt about it that some people respond differently to different leadership styles. And, right when, Evan was kind of talking before, after me just chatting a little bit about some overviews of the season, what I was about to say is that the identity of this team and the mentality of this team is what shocks me the most. Mm-hmm. It's not even like, okay, Donovan Smith took a step back. All right, maybe that's not, we maybe could have seen that coming. Leonard Fournette, all right, he's getting a little bit older. Maybe we could have seen that coming. He shows up to camp overweight. All right, maybe he's not the best version of himself that he's been. Like Chris Godwin coming back from injury, Julio Jones, he's getting older. The offensive line, they're beat up. Like you can find little things here and there, but it's the mentality of this team that is so shocking to me.
And I'm sorry to cut you off again, and I cut a whole promo on this 2-3 weeks ago. In my opinion, I feel like it's the complacency. Like, do you feel that as well? Does it feel like there hasn't been enough of a clear effort by both Todd Bowles and even Byron Leftwich, who has been criticized for the offense so far this season? Does it feel like there is a sense of complacency with this coaching staff that there wouldn't have been with Bruce Arians as head coach?
I don't know if complacency is the word, because if you say complacency, then it kind of makes you think like, oh, these coaches are coasting off the fact that they've got a Super Bowl ring and they don't really care that they're losing. And I would push back on that. I think they care that they're losing. Like they don't want to be losing games. So I wouldn't say that they're complacent, because I do think that it eats them up. But for whatever reason, there's no belief when things go wrong. And with Arians, I am a firm believer that a team takes on the identity of their head coach. It is just a natural thing that happens. Arians was a loud, in-your-face, aggressive, always confident, always hopeful, risk it kind of a head coach. That is a fiery, meaningful, confident head coach that you cannot help but I think take on the identity of. And when you saw the Buccaneers back against the wall, yes, they had other players, and I think the roster, certainly everyone would say during the Super Bowl year, was better than the roster they have now. But even that mentality, that fight, that belief was there for this team the way that it is not here with this team. They're sitting here at 6-8. If you even put just the belief from the Super Bowl team, just that mentality from the Super Bowl team on this current Buccaneers team, they're at least 8-6. They are at least 8-6. They at least have 2 more wins. And it, like, you go back to the Bengals game, and there have been a bunch of games that they've already played where it's been almost embarrassing how they cannot stop this avalanche, this snowball of negativity. One bad play. I go all the way back to that Carolina Panthers game that they lost, which, look, I know Carolina's feisty. Embarrassing loss. They shouldn't have lost that game, especially from where Carolina was at the time, right? Mike Evans, in the 3rd play of the game, drops the wide open, what should have been easy touchdown. And Evans says after the game, I saw the life drain out of everybody after I dropped that ball. After the 3rd play of the game? The third play of the game? And like that, to me, I don't think Mike's lying or anything like that. I think that speaks volumes of where this team is at mentally. That if one thing goes wrong, the second Burrow started to snap it back into place on Sunday, you could see everybody. Here we go again. Mm-hmm. Here it comes. We're up 17-0. Well, it doesn't matter. All of a sudden, boom, Bengals got 34 points. Game didn't even feel like it was close at any point in time by the time the clock is 0 in the 4th quarter. That's the thing that I think is the most frustrating for the Buccaneers is it's that. And that you don't really have an answer for, right? I mean, you can't go sign mentality in free agency, right? You can't go draft hope and confidence. Like those are things you can obviously draft players and the team gets better and it's easier to get those things. But I think that's the most frustrating thing for fans is that you look at a team where, yeah, they're not clearly as talented as they have been in the past, but still, even for where they are, it's frustrating to watch the mentality of them. And it just doesn't feel like they believe in themselves. And I think that's the product that you see out on the field. And unfortunately, going back to your original question, talking about the head coach and the coaching staff, that part to me does fall on the coaching staff. That part does fall on the coaching staff. Players have a responsibility for it too. But that's what it feels like the biggest difference is between this year, last year, and the year before that.
So we talk a lot on this show about, the coaching staff and everything, but it's also execution of the players, right? The players,
Sure.
Coaches aren't going out there, the Byron Leftwich didn't bobble the ball trying to give it to Leonard Fournette, he didn't tell Tom Brady to do that. So, and I think a lot of people are sort of wrestling with the idea, and the more losses pile up, the more people are so quick to blame the coaching staff. And I think they are definitely to blame for a lot of this. And I think that Byron Leftwich should certainly be on the hot seat. I don't see it. Your former colleague at Pewter Report, Scott Reynolds, believes there's no way that Leftwich should survive this offseason, basically. And I think a lot of people agree. But when you look at this season as a whole, do you think it's more on, I think it's a mix of both, but do you think it's more on that change at coach, that mentality, or do you think it's just, look, the players aren't executing the way they used to?
It's definitely both. I will say this. I think my immediate answer to that question is coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think there's a lot of things that have happened behind closed doors within this organization that we don't know. Like, let's be honest, guys. The whole Brady retiring and then coming out of retirement and then Bruce Arians stepping down like 2 weeks later. I don't believe the whole like Brady talked to the owners and said, it's Bruce or me. If Bruce leaves, then I'll come back. Like, I don't fully believe that, but I do wonder what happened after Bruce Arians really stepped down, because if anybody out there is like fans of the show, like Game of Thrones, right? Like anytime there was a new king that was established, it didn't matter if that king wore the crown. There were people who were vying for the actual power within the inner circle or whatever. So I'm not, again, I don't want to like accuse anybody or anything, but I truly believe that there is stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. Because on the surface level, it's really easy to blame the head coaches. But then I often stop myself and be like, this is the same coaching staff. Like, even if you want to say Todd Bowles, he's a more soft-spoken guy, he's not as fiery of a leader, that goes into it. As you guys know, I just said that. So I think that is true. But to this extent, I don't know. That's what kind of makes me think that there are a lot of politics and things that go on behind closed doors of a team that we never find out.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into it as much as anything else too, the stuff that we can't see.
Yeah. We'll never hear about that stuff unless, Tom Brady writes about it in a book 40 years from now when people aren't caring that much. Maybe we'll hear about it.
Yeah, when he retires in 39 years.
Right, exactly.
Then he'll write the book 40 years from now.
But as of right now, we talk about the state of the Bucs, and we mentioned this coaching staff. Scott Reynolds had even alluded a couple of times this year to legitimate tension inside One Buc Place, which can support some of what you're saying. I'm sure that there are things that have been said, and I'm sure that there has been a much more increased level of tension this year because, let's face it,
which happens when you're losing.
Yeah, winning cures everything. Like, nobody's happy to come to work when you're 6-8 and you just lost 2 in a row in embarrassing fashion. Nobody's happy to see each other in that circumstance. But obviously, we're in a situation now where it seems like the expectations are that even though this season has not gone to plan, we're more than likely going to get another season of Todd Bowles. Not sure what the mix-up at offensive coordinator is going to be, as most people think that, Byron Leftwich will no longer be here following the offseason. Todd Bowles with a chance to kind of break that Arians coaching tree, which will also be pretty interesting to set expectations for next season. But let's talk about how the rest of this season wraps up here. Now, as a Bucs fan, this has been a discussion that has been brought up on the Twitterverse, on social media, on message boards, anywhere you can find it. And a lot of people are going back and forth about what kind of opinion, I guess, you should have as a fan regarding the Bucs and maybe what scenario is going to be best for the team in the long run. When I checked today, the Bucs right now are slated for the 19th pick in the 2023 NFL draft. Can you get an impactful player at 19? Yeah, you can. Is it as easy as a top 10 pick? It is not, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are also first place in the NFC South, and at this rate, they are on pace to have a home playoff game, something that they have only had once before in a decade and a half. So with that being said, former colleague of yours, John Ledyard, had posed the question, is it better for the Bucs in long-term success for Carolina to just go ahead and win the division this year so the Bucs get a little bit better draft placement? Maybe it knocks down the credit of Todd Bowles and shakes things up in that department as well. Or do you think people should be more amped up about the fact that the Bucs only have 6 wins and they're still on pace to be the 4 seed in the NFC? Like, where do you fall in that discussion as far as, what do you think is going to be best for this team in the long run? Because for a team that doesn't hang a lot of division banners, even if they limp into the playoffs at 8-9, it's going to be hard to knock Todd Bowles for winning the NFC South his first year as head coach.
Yeah, first of all, who's John Ledyard? I've never heard of him. No, I love John. Well, it is obviously an interesting question because, the joke has kind of come up over the last couple of weeks. Somebody's got to win the NFC South. We know that's how the NFL
Nobody wants to do it. Nobody at all.
No, the problem is, Rhett, is that a lot of people want to do it and they can't.
Yeah.
They can't do it is the thing. You've got, 3 teams that
5 and 9,
and then 1 team at 6 and 8. I genuinely believe that whoever wins this division is going to win it at 7 and 10, which is hilarious. And what's also hilarious about this is if the Bucs win it, which they have the highest odds, obviously, to win the division. If they win it, they'll probably get the Cowboys in round 1, and the Bucs have had the Cowboys number for the last 2 years. So it's like of
Tom
any
Brady's
team,
never lost.
if any team you could have played, it's probably the Cowboys.
I don't want to be overly optimistic. Tom Brady has done a lot of things in his 23-plus year career in the NFL, but it's like, I mean, once you get to the tournament, everybody's 0-0. The Bucs have an above-average defense, and even though he's not the Tom Brady from 20 and 21, he's still Tom Brady, and he's still making the throws that this offense needs to play well this year. So I don't want to plant the seed for anyone who has just accepted the fact that the Bucs are a first-round exit, but I legitimately feel like even with the Bucs playing as bad as they have, anything could happen in the postseason.
Look, they're playing the Cowboys round 1. They play the Eagles round 2. Jalen Hurts' shoulder is still going to be hurt. They're going to beat the Eagles. They're going to upset the Eagles. And then it's 49ers. They're going to lose 34-0 to the 49ers.
Oh, that's where the fun ends.
I couldn't even make up a situation where that would have been fun. Look, going back to your original question, fans should root for whatever makes them happy, honestly. That's one, first and foremost. This is what sports are about. Root for whatever makes you happy. If you want the team to lose because you love the idea of them getting a higher draft pick, as we mentioned, the records of the other 3 teams in the NFL right now, the Carolina Panthers, the New Orleans Saints, and the Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons. I forgot which one I didn't say. They are picks 7, 8, and 9 in the NFL draft right now.
Big
so
difference.
if the Buccaneers do not make the division, there's a good chance that they're going to have a top 10 overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. So obviously that's a big deal. If you think that is the best long-term for the team, get a little bit closer, maybe drafting a quarterback, whatever it is, you're allowed to root for that. I was asked this question actually earlier today, ironically enough. And Rhett, I kind of took the latter point that you made. I've watched Bucs football my entire life. I'm from just south of Tampa. It's my childhood team. We all have watched a lot of really bad Buccaneers football over the years. And I will not be one to root for losses while one Tom Brady is still on the team. So I personally won't be going that route. But honestly, man, fans should have the freedom and be able to root for it however they want. And I think that John was saying that as well. John, I know what he was doing. John was definitely just pointing out like, hey, the team's not Super Bowl caliber this year. Mm-hmm. The team's probably not even deep playoff run this year. Right. The team, in all honesty, probably going to make the playoffs at below 500, probably going to get beat in the wild card round. They're probably going to be a one and done. Would you rather be a one and done in the playoffs, or would you rather lose and get a top 10 pick? For the future, for a sustainable next winning window, right, you'd probably rather do that. But he wasn't telling anybody how to feel, and I don't think we should either.
And when you've got those fan colored glasses on, logic doesn't always apply. right? Like, obviously, the more logical thing you want to do for the future of the team is try and secure a top 10 pick, go after that next franchise player, whatever position it may be. But let me ask you one more worst case scenario question here.
Oh, love these. Thank you.
Yeah, if the Bucs somehow miss the playoffs, does Todd Bowles have a job next season in Tampa Bay?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the $1 million question, right? I think up to this point, and I would still at this point in time say that Todd Bowles is going to be the head coach. You look at the way that Todd Bowles ascended to the head coaching position in the offseason, and Bruce Arians purposefully stepped away, gave his headset to Todd Bowles, not because he didn't think that like no one else was going to give it to Bowles, but I think that he has watched what has happened to not just Todd Bowles, but black head coaches and black head coaching candidates over the years. You know, Arian's been in coaching a long time, and he's watched a lot of good coaches get passed over for a lot of jobs. And I think a good chunk of those would be black head coaches that, quite frankly, just do not get the same level of respect and level of consideration as their white counterparts. I think that that's just absolutely true. And the reason why Arian stepped away the way that he did, and if you remember what he said, is he was championing Todd Bowles, and he believes that Todd Bowles was fully deserving of that opportunity with Tom Brady to get a legit shot with a legit team, not just him getting a head coaching job for a rebuilding franchise and being another head coach scapegoat, kind of like it felt like he was with the New York Jets. So for the reasons why he became the head coach in Tampa Bay, it would be really hard for me to think ownership's going to pull the plug on that. It turns, whether you think it's the right move or not, which I know a lot of people out there think that it's the right move to move on from Todd Bowles. It's a tough look, no matter what, given what happened last year and how they got into this situation with him being head coach. And it's just, again, I'm kind of hesitant to even say all of that, because it always comes off as like, well, if Todd Bowles, keeps the head coaching job, he doesn't really deserve it. I don't know exactly what's been going on behind the scenes, but there's no doubt that if you look at wins and loss record this season, been a massive disappointment. So that one I know is very true, and you can't really run away from that. But I do think Todd Bowles is going to be the head coach of this team next year for a myriad of reasons. Those are a couple of reasons why.
I do think history also shows that, like, the Glazers just don't, they don't have a history of cutting guys after one season. Like,
they're not one and done.
You can look at Greg Schiano, that's kind of the outlier in that situation. But even if he somehow misses the playoffs this year, I kind of want to agree, while it would be an easier situation to just rip the Band-Aid off, I do agree with what you said. And it would be a bit of a bad look there. Evan, I know I kind of jumped on top of you there. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, just the tough thing for me when you're talking about missing the playoffs, one, if they go 1-2 and miss the playoffs, let's say one of the losses is to Carolina takes the division.
That's tough.
But it's even tougher if they lose all three. Like, imagine if they lose their final 5 games of the season, and they're a Tom Brady play away from beating the Saints, away from losing the last 6 games of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how Todd Bowles, I understand the situation with Bruce Arians and everything. To me, though, how can Todd Bowles say, I know we went 6-11 with Tom Brady, but next year we're going to be even better without him?
Yeah.
That's
a tough sell.
How can if now I don't know, are the Glazers going to look at it and say, okay, the 3 years was great. We're going to give Bowles the leash here because we know that this season isn't going to be the prettiest. But if the Glazers are still thinking, let's go out and compete, how can Todd Bowles convince them that he's the guy after all this stuff has happened? And yeah, I'm sure the Glazers know a lot more than we do about what has gone on in behind closed doors and everything. But that's like you said, that's the tough sell for me for Bowles. And I mean, he could sell it as, I'm gonna find a new offensive coordinator, this and that. This really isn't Todd Bowles' staff. Like, this is Bruce Arians' handpicked staff.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't consult Todd Bowles when he was building the staff on, do you want Byron Leftwich as the offensive coordinator? Like, that's not a Todd Bowles decision. And by the time that move had happened, it was late March. Like, it was too late to do anything at that point.
Mhm.
So I do think there is some cases that Bowles could make, but to me, if you're missing the playoffs, anytime you miss the playoffs with a quarterback like Tom Brady and the roster's talented as this, wouldn't it just be almost delaying the inevitable? Because you would imagine Bowles is entering 2023 on the hot seat if they miss the playoffs.
Right.
You would imagine that you win 4 or 5 games in 2023, he's going to be gone anyway.
Yeah.
So you're just sort of delaying the inevitable to me. And again, I personally think they're still going to win the NFC South. And we talked about it. You're not going to fire a coach when you're hanging up a banner the next day. It says NFC South champions. Todd Bowles they swept the Saints. They beat the Rams. That's 2 things that Bruce Arians seems never did. So, I mean, he's got some stuff to hang his hat on, but it's just that thing of missing the playoffs in a division this bad in Tom Brady's potential final season with the team or in the NFL. It's just that's a tough pill to swallow if you're the Glazers and Jason Light. And it's also, how are you going to sell the fans on that as well?
Right. No, it gets really tough. Look, I think it's going to be tough even if they win the division, right? It's going to be tough to get that taste out of your mouth of kind of what a disappointment this season has been. I'm kind of obviously talking from the vantage point of where we sit today. If they were to lose 3 in a row, if they lose 2 out of the next 3, maybe I'll sit here and I will feel different. But I do still feel at this point the same that I felt I'll say midway through the year, where I was like, look, things don't look great. You can make a case for the head coach to be fired, but one and done head coaches are tough. And a one and done head coach, given the situation of what we had last offseason, and how Todd Bowles came to that position, would just be a really tough look. Again, even if you think that it would be the correct decision, would the Glazers make that? I don't know.
Not to quote John again, he does it better than I could, but it would be regarded as an all-time fumbling of the bag, and it would obviously be the Bucs admitting that that's exactly what happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
They have lost faith in Todd Bowles. With another quarterback other than Tom Brady, he's not going to be able to make this team a contender once again. But
because you got to think about it. If you are firing Todd Bowles, I can't imagine Arians is going to stick around at all.
Yeah,
right?
no way. I honestly, I feel like, maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like once Brady's gone, Arians is also gone out of that imaginary position he has as well.
Well, maybe, but I don't know how much stress this current position has on Arians. Like, I don't know if it's the exact same thing. But if you are moving on from Todd Bowles, like if a month from now they're moving on from Todd Bowles, then they probably didn't win the division. They probably got a top 10 overall pick, and they're going to have openings at head coach, offense coordinator, defensive coordinator, and quarterback. Like, it is going to be, you are going to see full Buccaneer rebuild of old if they end up firing Todd Bowles, which maybe some people really want. But that is what the massive changes that we might get if they get rid of him. Because I do think that Byron Leftwich is done. I think he has to be done. Yeah. Somebody has to be the fall guy for what happened this season. I think it's going to be Leftwich. But if Leftwich leaves, does Brady stick around? I mean, I don't know.
So here's the thing with me, though, and this is why I'm going to argue that point about the rebuild. If you get a top 10 pick, let's say you get a CJ Stroud, does it have to be a rebuild? Let's say you get we saw what Mike McDaniel has done in Miami in his first year, Brian Daboll, right, in New York. Does it have to be a rebuild? Because could this be more of a retool? That there's, it's not like, unless you're trading guys, Mike Evans, if you're trading, a Devin White, you're getting rid of those guys, sure. But like, you have Tristan Wirfs, one of the best right tackles in the sport. Mike Evans, still a great receiver. Chris Godwin would be a year removed from a major injury. Ryan Jensen would be coming back. If you get a guy like a CJ Stroud, who's a guy who I think's ready to play, right? I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are the two that are ready to play right now. And you get the right head coach in there. Who's to say it's not more of a retool rather than a rebuild? That's the only thing I would push back on that.
I think that it would just kind of come down to how you're going to go about the roster after this. Like, if you're getting rid of Todd Bowles, and I'm thinking about all this for the first time, so this is all I'm literally just kind of like
putting
vomiting my words here. No, it's fine. This is when like these exercises are fun. But like, if you're getting rid of Todd Bowles, if you're getting rid of the offensive coordinator, and if Tom Brady's no longer on the team, are you keeping the entire rest of the team. Because I do hear what you're saying, right? There's good head coach candidates out there, right? And I think that they'd be able to fill out a good staff. And, maybe you get yourself a CJ Stroud, a Will Levis, something like that, and Anthony Richardson. I don't know. But do you move on from other pieces? Like Donovan Smith is all of a sudden going to be 30 years old next year, coming off not a very good year this year, and you could save $10 million on the cap if you cut him.
Right.
Levante David is, for as much as I would love for Levante David to never play in another uniform other than a Buccaneer uniform for his entire career, he's an unrestricted free agent this year, and he's getting up there in age. Julio Jones, an unrestricted free agent. Akeem Hicks, an unrestricted free agent. Carl Nassib, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, like all of these guys that were part of a core that was obviously in the old winning window. Do you bring a bunch of them back? Do you try to run it back with a younger quarterback, or do you go, no, we're hitting reset on all of it? And you have the ability to do that. It just, do you? So wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, no, that's the question I was going to pose, is like, how much of this core can you keep, move forward, and stay competitive as well? Because I think that's the question you have to ask yourself if you're in a situation where they do move on from Todd Bowles. You know what I mean? You can make a move on a rookie quarterback, and honestly, I still feel like this Bucs roster has the core to be somewhat competitive with a rookie quarterback and a new head coach. Like, I don't think it would be
like if it's a high tier guy like Stroud.
Yeah,
or something.
100%. If you are in a position where you have a top 10 draft pick, you're going to have to allocate some resources, because Trevor, like you had brought up, just that laundry list of free agents that the Bucs have. And there's a lot of guys that you could potentially move on from and try and get younger at that position, maybe sacrificing, your skill depth at that certain position, but you're looking towards the future. So let me ask you another scenario here. And I guess this has to do with Tom Brady in particular and kind of what we've been talking about with the future of Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the general consensus is that Todd Bowles is back next season. So what do you make of Tom Brady? I mean, a lot of people definitely feel like the ship has sailed. He is 100% going to be out of Tampa, regardless of if he plays another year or not, and he just retires again. Do you think Tom Brady retires at the end of the year, or do you think if he plays another season, it's definitely not going to be in Tampa?
I think him coming back to Tampa is option 3. I think retirement is probably option 1. I would say that playing for another team is option 2, only because he would be very selective with where he would go. And for as much as I think that Tom Brady is pretty low on the totem pole of things that are to blame this season, this has not been a great Tom Brady year. Whereas, like, for example, last year, him going through this whole, can I play for a different team that's not the Bucs? So many teams in the NFL would have wanted Tom Brady, no second thought. Would they now? I think the suitors are probably less jazzed about it at this point. He's a year older. He's coming off one of his worst years in a long, long time. So that's why I would say I think retirement is probably number 1 for him, the most likely outcome. Number 2 would be probably playing for a different team. And then number 3 would be coming back to Tampa Bay. I don't think it's impossible. It's been so bad this year. I don't know if he would want to subject himself to another year.
The damage has been done, is what you're saying.
Not fully, but there has been damage done, I guess I would say.
So here's and I still believe, I've said it for a while, I still believe Brady is going to retire at the end of the year. He wanted to play until he was 45. He just turned 40. He's 45 right now. Like, it's, that's what his goal was. He wanted to do that. He's done that. So I think he's accomplished everything he's wanted to do. And I think, with his off-field situation, I think it's changed a lot. And I think that's why a lot of people are saying, well, maybe he will, maybe he will come back for another year. And I'm a bit more optimistic about, I don't know, we're not going to say it's likely, but if he does decide to play, I'm a bit more optimistic that it could be in Tampa. And here's why. Bruce Arians steps down, just like we said, right? We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. You don't think Tom Brady knew that the guy was going to be Todd Bowles? Like, you don't think if Tom Brady had any reservations about Todd Bowles that he would say them, and maybe it would give them pause? Maybe it's Harold Goodwin instead. Maybe it's Byron Leftwich. You don't think that? So I don't think it's a Todd Bowles thing. Is he a little frustrated with Leftwich? Maybe. what if we just talked about Leftwich likely isn't going to be here?
Mhm.
So what if Tom Brady gets to say in the offensive coordinator? He's getting his Pro Bowl center back. I know he's over 30 years old and it was a serious injury, but he's going to have Ryan Jensen back for next year. It's in a familiar.
Shaq Mason also still under contract. Russell Gage still here. Mike's still here. Chris Godwin's still here.
There's a lot of the core still there.
Mhm.
If you bring back Brady, you're probably bringing back Levante David. What has, you list the free agents. Are they going to miss Kyle Rudolph? Are they going to miss Julio Jones? Are they going to miss Akeem Hicks? Are they going to miss those guys? So you say, oh, look at these free agents. Are they going to miss Cameron Brate if they decide to cut him? Are they going to miss Leonard Fournette if they decide to cut him? So, there's a lot of things. And the obvious one, and this is why I'm going to compare it, because everybody says, oh, he's just going to end up in San Francisco. Assuming that's a 1 year or at most 2 year thing, does he really want to move all the way across the country to play for a brand new offense with brand new teammates at 46 years old, when it's known that his preference is also the East Coast to be closer to his son? That's tough. That's tough. I still believe retirement is the most likely thing. However, I think I would probably have Tampa as option 2 instead of option 3 for the reasons I listed. I think they obviously, Ian Rappaport said it as such, and I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, yeah, of course the Bucs would love to have him back. Like, no dip. But, and I think Brady does genuinely like it in Tampa. I think if he didn't, things would be it'd be a lot more loud. I think if he didn't, and I just think there's more of a chance. I don't think it's likely, but I think there's more of a chance if he decides to play in 2023 that it could be, for the Bucs.
Those are solid points. I agree. It all kind of just depends. Again, this goes back to what the mindset is of these guys, almost at a personal level, right? At like a life level, and those things. I do think fans don't take that into consideration as much as they should when it comes to guys moving, different decisions, how long the contract is, all that stuff.
That was a big thing for Brady choosing Tampa the first time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The location and family and stuff. So I don't, I don't know. And like I said, I still, if I had to bet, Tom Brady will not be on the Bucs next year. But I also don't believe he's going to be in the NFL. I think he's taken a lot of hits this year. His shoulder got a little messed up, which I don't know if that's fully healed from that Chiefs game in Week 4 when he had the fumble and his shoulder got hit pretty good. He was beat around in San Francisco. I think he's taken a lot of hits. Like I said, he wanted to play till he's 45. He went to a different team, won a Super Bowl. Doesn't sound like his buddy, Gronkowski has any interest in really coming back to football. So I just, Antonio Brown, that whole thing kind of blew up. So I just think he's going to look at the end of the year and just say, like, look, if I don't want to do the Fox thing, I can probably get out of it, but I got this huge job at Fox, and that's probably what I'll go do. So that's what I had to guess.
Now, we've spent a lot of time covering hypothetical scenarios for Tampa Bay on today's pod. Let's wrap it up with probably the most likely scenario for Tampa Bay. Let's assume they make the playoffs. They're a first-round exit. You've got a mid-round first-round pick. You got Todd Bowles coming back. Offensive coordinator probably up in the air, but a lot of people also seem to think there's going to be a change at quarterback. So Trevor, let me ask you this. For Tampa Bay, if they find themselves in that position, right? Mid-round first pick, first-round exit, Tom Brady retires, Todd Bowles is coming back with a new offensive coordinator.
I know what you're going to ask him. Is it going to be the battle of Florida Gator quarterbacks in training camp for the Buccaneers?
Not exactly that question in particular, but I did want to ask, what does the battle plan look like for the Bucs? Do they want to try and kick the can down the road and be aggressive in going after another quarterback to follow up Tom Brady? Or are they just going to kind of take it on the chin and accept the fact that maybe they're not going to be as aggressive in the quarterback sweepstakes? You end up signing a free agent, Gardner Minshew, to bring in legitimate competition for Kyle Trask to see what a year of that is going to look like. And maybe that's good enough to get you, a good quarterback in the 2024 draft. Like, what is your opinion on where this Bucs team is going to be headed, particularly at the quarterback position, if Tom Brady retires like we all expect him to?
Gardner Minshew, that'd be fun.
Come on, dude. I'm telling you.
I don't know if Gardner Minshew would be bad enough for them to draft a quarterback the next year, though. The team would probably be too good.
Listen, I've been telling everybody about Minshew Mania in Tampa Bay, and they talk to me like I'm a madman. So please talk to the people.
Well, we're going to get to see it with Jalen Hurts being out, I think, at least for a game. So people will get to see some Minshew Mania in Philadelphia, at least to end the season a little bit here. Obviously, mock drafts and predictions can change a lot between now and the end of April. But, I mean, I'm going to be honest. They're sitting there at 19. I don't know if there's going to be a quarterback that they like at 19. Like, the
only one that's possibly there is Richardson. Right?
Yeah, I definitely don't think they're going to be
all said and done. I don't think Richardson's going to be.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in my head, like, if I had to put $100 on the line right now, are Bryce Young, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson gone before 19? I'd say, yeah, I'd put $100 on the line that all four of them are gone before 19. That would leave you with like Tanner McKee, Hendon Hooker, like somebody like that. But it's like, I don't think you're taking those guys at 19. So
I don't think they're going to be hunting for a quarterback at 19.
Hendon Hooker is a 25-year-old quarterback who just had a major injury. You're not taking him in the first round.
No, you're not. No, you're not. Wonderful season from Hendon.
Yes.
It was unbelievable to watch, but you're not taking him in the first round. I mean, if one of those guys is available around 19, I think that you go hunting for it, because I don't think the future quarterback for the Buccaneers, the future franchise quarterback's on the roster. I mean, Blaine Gabbert's a free agent as well. Ryan Griffin, obviously, we know, has never really been called upon to be a starting quarterback. Kyle Trask was picked at the back end of the second round, but I always thought that was a weird pick for the Buccaneers anyways, and he's been inactive on game day. So it's a scenario where he'd be totally green at this point to believe in him, and I don't have a ton of faith in him as a potential franchise quarterback for Tampa. So I think they'll be looking. But if they're not in the quarterback sweepstakes and they're in the middle of that first round, I think it's got to be defensive line. Like, I think they have a lot of names along the defensive line. I don't think they have a lot of impact players, right? Vita was not the Vita Vea that we know in the first, I'll say, like, quarter of the season, third of the season. Now, he came on and he started to play better, which is nice. And you're getting, like, a much better version of Vita Vea when he's been healthy out there. Shaq Barrett is still a really good player, but coming off a major injury going into next season, where's the explosiveness going to be? Is it going to be at the level that you need to have it? I like what Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has shown, but he still hasn't become that finisher yet. Hoping he takes that next step next season. But like, you look at William Golson's a free agent, Akeem Hicks is a free agent, Rakeem Nunez-Roches is a free agent, Carl Nass is a free agent. Obviously, they don't have Jason Pierre-Paul anymore.
Anthony Nelson as well.
Anthony Nelson's a free agent. So not that you can't bring any of those guys back. They could probably bring a couple of them back if they wanted to, but you need difference makers. And along the defensive line, I look at a guy like Siaka Ika from Baylor, who gives kind of a similar skill set to Vita Vea, just a mismatched power interior player who gives you some really plus pass rush ability as well. Along the edge rusher, if you want to get another edge rusher in there, BJ Ojulari, maybe a Byron Young. I don't think Tyree Wilson's going to be there. He should be, because I'm not the biggest fan of Tyree Wilson. But those kinds of players, I think you could draft somewhere around 19. But if it's not quarterback for the Buccaneers, I think it's got to be defensive line. That feels like the area that could be the most glaring if they don't address it.
And the tough thing for me to have this exercise, and of course all can change. Free agencies before the draft. What happens if the Bucs can't pay Jamel Dean? Then cornerback shoots up your board.
Huge.
A Christian Gonzalez from Oregon if he's there, a Clark Phillips from Utah if he's there. That changes a lot, right? But I do agree that if you're not getting quarterback, now the one question I want to ask you, because I want to stick on the quarterback thing, because we'll have you on before the draft and everything for sure to break all that stuff down. But okay, so let's say you're not drafting a quarterback. Are you, if you're the GM of the Buccaneers, Tom Brady is no longer there. Let's say you get a different offensive coordinator. Are you signing? Well, it's a different question. It's not which guy. It's, are you signing a veteran, or are you just saying, look, like, you drafted Trask in the second round, like, let's see what we have. Let's re-sign Gabbert and let's see what we have in Trask. Or are you going the veteran route with Minshew or a Jacoby Brissett, something like that in free agency? I know it's a tough question, but
I think I just as an outsider, I'd probably go Trask. You invested a second round pick in him for a reason, so I'd probably give him that chance. But I'm not. It's not like I'm at practice every day watching all of practice. So like I don't know how he's been progressing. Like if they could very well be like, yeah, he ain't ready.
He did look better this preseason than he did last preseason.
Right. So like and that's why I think that I'd probably give him the reins over signing a veteran. I really would. I'd probably kind of. It's tough, right? Because I think the roster's getting a little bit older. A lot of those core guys are getting a little bit older. You don't just want to simulate a year because that's another year on the contracts, another year of them getting older. And that's kind of a tough sell. But I think rather than use free agency money or draft capital to go trade for a guy, I'd probably just start Trask. See what you have in him. And if it's not good, you're drafting a quarterback for sure next year.
All right, so one last question as we kind of wrap this thing up, and you probably just answered this, but your prediction for the starting quarterback on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2023, who is it, and why is it Lamar Jackson? Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit on that part, but who do you think is going to be the Bucs starting quarterback?
Well, it's Lamar Jackson because Mike Greenberg's an absolute wizard with the cap.
I'm telling you, don't ever count him out.
Cop out answer, but I'll just say that it's not Tom Brady. I just think that there's too many wild cards about where they could end up drafting. If they're picking in the top 10, I think there's a very good chance they're taking a quarterback. But if not, it would be hard for me to think that they would just totally go out and sign a guy.
So let's do Kyle Trask / Blaine Gabbert or the field. One of those two guys or the rest of them.
Well, because if it's one of those two guys, eventually it's going to become both of them. I feel like,
morph.
I feel like, if Gabbert starts, if Trask
I guess
starts,
this is a different question between what I would do and what I think the team's going to do.
Yes.
I think I would take the field then. I think that they bring somebody else in.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Minshew mania, baby.
Maybe.
Listen.
One last quarterback question. Do you think they draft a quarterback at all in the draft?
Trying to think of this class and how deep it might be.
Because I think there could be some talent in the second and third round.
Maybe some guys that fall.
To me, I would rather just, if you're not picking one in the first, like I would just rather just.
The Bucs aren't really at a point to where it's like, oh, let's just take a quarterback and see. I mean, I get you. Look, guys work out all the time, so I say it in that voice, and maybe I'm just a dumbass about it. But, right. So, I would say yes. Then, like if it's Gabbert and Trask that you're rolling with, and you don't bring in a free agent, I would say that they're probably drafting a quarterback at some point.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen,
got 3 games left, so we will see. Real quick, I want to ask you one last question. Mm-hmm. Would you, if you're let's say you're an opposing, team, would you rather play the Bucs or the Vikings in the first round? I mean, it's. Would you rather play Kirk Cousins or Tom Brady? Like,
well, if it's Kirk, it's probably a primetime game.
Yeah,
it goes into it. I'd still rather play the Bucs. The Bucs stink. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh man.
I'm sorry.
What a way to put a bow on this one. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the pod.
Your 2022-2023 NFC South champions.
Back-to-back, baby.
Oh, man. Looking forward to the Bucs hopefully keeping things together just enough to hang a banner at the end of this year we can...
When's the last time the Bucs won back-to-back NFC South titles? Like
literally, I think early 2000s.
It's got to be Super Bowl era, right?
Yeah. Like the first few seasons the NFC South was even created, I'm sure they were still a competitive team.
Let's see, back to back. Did they do it in the Gruden years? They didn't do it in the Gruden years.
Yeah, they won it the first year. Then the next one that was 2000.
They were second. They've never won back to back.
This Bucs team is going to go 8-9 and make history. It's the first the Buccaneers team to go back to back.
It's incredible how we're tracking the history of this team. They have been both historically bad and a lot of season firsts, obviously for Tampa Bay. It would be a franchise first to get 2 division titles in back-to-back years. And of course, this is also the year that they sweep New Orleans for the first time in a decade and a half and get the LA Rams off of their back. But I've said it before, I'll say it again. If there's anything we can be happy about, it's that, after the Bucs won the Super Bowl in 2021, they didn't go out like a bunch of chumps like we have watched the Rams do this season. I know injuries have obviously played a part, but listen, they won the Super Bowl and then won a franchise high number of games. So I'm okay with that.
One thing really quick I say to everybody when, like, obviously up in the Philly area, people ask me my opinion on what happened, what's happened. I'm like, it's so funny because the 1 year they beat the Rams and the Saints, they can't beat anybody else.
Yeah.
Anybody else.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the pod. Thank you so much for hanging out with us live on YouTube today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content. Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, where can the people find you and your awesome content?
Yeah, PFF.com. A lot of great video stuff that we're doing over on PFF's YouTube channel. We got a daily show at 11 a.m. every single day, Monday through Friday.
Fantastic.
It's just football. Me and Mike Renner, we're having a lot of fun there. And then, if you anybody out there trying to dip your toe a little bit into draft season, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, myself and Connor Rogers, we're going through our early position rankings right now, giving you guys our top fives, our top tens for every position in the upcoming NFL draft. Having a lot of fun doing that.
Thanks again for your time. Always a pleasure to have you on the show with us. Find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. I know you have the stock report coming out this week, but what else you got?
The predictions review should be out soon, and then obviously going to be looking at 3 burning questions for this week as well.
Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. We'll talk to you later this week. Get you warmed up for a Christmas Day battle in the desert between Tampa Bay and Arizona. Should be a good game, and I'm hoping that we can unwrap a W for the first time in what feels like forever in front of our families, because if I got to sit around my mom for a second week in a row and watch the Bucs just collapse like they did against Cincinnati, they might have to put me on a list. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and special guest, Trevor Sikkema. We'll talk to you on Friday. Until then, and as always, thanks for listening, and go Bucs.